Hi everybody, it's Becky with Icing on Top Becky's Cakes, and today we're going to make this sugar dragon. And the same principles I use in this video for casting a sugar dragon and painting it, you can use for any mold that you use with Isomalt. So I'm going to walk you through the steps and let's begin. Now I've put my pre-cooked ice malt into the microwave until it's come to a boil. So you have to make sure, step one, always bring it to a roaring boil. And then after you color it, make sure that you bring it back to a boil. Once the bubbles are done, then we'll begin pouring. And when we pour it into a mold, make sure your silicone mold is a food grade silicone that can withstand high temperatures. Otherwise you're gonna ruin your mold. And so you want to pour it while it's still really runny and not too thick, but also you want to pour it while it doesn't have those bubbles in it from boiling. So you have to find that sweet spot. As soon as it's done with those bubbles and the boiling and you've waited long enough for those bubbles to kind of dissipate, then you begin pouring. And when you pour ice malt like this, you're going to make sure that you get into each of these crevices because it's not just going to spread on its own. So I also have a tool to help me for any crevice I don't get into. But I'm going to kind of move my sugar as I pour it with my silicone bowl, and I'm going to move it back and forth to get into each of these little crevices that I can, so that it saves me a little work. For any of the crevices, I'm going to have to come back and touch up with my tool or a toothpick if you don't have a silicone tool. I'm going to also work a little quickly so that I get it while it's still nice and runny. Otherwise, you can reheat it again in the microwave and try again. Since it's ice malt, you can reheat it as many times as you want. So if you test this out and didn't work the first time, take it out of its mold when it cools, put it back in your silicone bowl and start pouring again. That's the great thing about ice malt. And if you want any of my tips on how to cook ice malt, to begin with, to get it to a pre-cooked state where you can heat it in the microwave at 30-second intervals, to that whole tutorial, I will put the link below so you know how to cook your own ice malt if you're not buying pre-cooked ice malt and just nuking it in the microwave at 30-second intervals. And see, I'm just slowly getting into each of those crevices. And then my other tip is I actually make lots of pre-cooked ice malt so that I can pop it into the microwave whenever I want. So if you just want to go ahead and make a lot of pre-cooked ice malt, it lasts forever, really. It lasts a long time as long as you store it nicely in a good airtight container. You could even put some one of those food grade moisture absorbers in there, and that'll keep your sugar, your ice malt longer and keep it lasting much better condition too. So I'm going to take my tool and kind of get into these little crevices here, and we're just going to move it into there. My hand is in the way for these. Let me see if I can get a better one for you. Just use that silicone tool, just move it very gently, and that's why you want to move it while it's still very hot, while the sugar's hot. Otherwise it'll get too sticky and you'll get a lot of stray flyaways and stuff, and you can just quickly torch any of those flyaways and that'll just melt it back into place. But it's much easier if you're able to move it while it's still quite hot and movable. And some of these on the tail end here, I want to make sure that each of these little spikes are going to be visible once we take it out. And the food coloring that I use for this is airbrush food coloring. I use Simicakes. I use white first so that it's going to be opaque, so it looks like a solid dragon. And then I used a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow until I got the color that I wanted. Mixed that, popped it back in the microwave, brought it back to a boil, and then it's thoroughly incorporated and ready to pour. Now once it's completely cooled, I'm going to slowly pull it out by moving the edges away so that I don't break off these little pieces. I had to touch my silicone to make sure the middle was also nice and firm. Silicone tool I used, and then I'm just going to peel away from these little pieces so that I don't break off these little pieces. So I go all the way around, and I do this especially where you see all of these hands and his feet and the tail. You want to make sure that's all pulled away, otherwise you'll just snap off these pieces. And you can reattach them by heating it with your torch and then heating the body itself and then hold it in place until it glues back together, but it's much easier if you just get it out the first time without snapping these pieces off. I'm gently gonna turn him over and just pull the rest off. Now you see all those little bubble areas. I'm gonna show you how to get rid of as much of that as you can. I'm gonna place this on my silicone mat so that it doesn't stick to anything. And then I'm gonna get my torch and I'm gonna very lightly torch off these bubbles. Now, if you give it too much torching, you're gonna lose a lot of those details. So you're gonna lightly torch it, step away, do a different part, come back and lightly torch a little more. If you concentrate too much on one area, you're gonna take off some of those details, and that ruins the purpose of our mold. So we're gonna lightly torch these in order to get out some of those bubbles. Then when we're done with the torching, we're gonna let it cool. And once it's done cooling, I'm gonna flip it over and I want to use a dowel. And the dowel is for the purpose of sticking it into the cake. That way it has something to hold on to on the cake. But not only with something this heavy do you want to use a dowel, you also want to use supports. So I also put supports in my cake, plus a cardboard support, like I was supporting a cake tier is how I would do that. If you want to learn more about like the cake tiers and stuff, I have a whole tutorial on how to stack, level, and support a cake. I can put that link for you below, but that's how I supported him, just like I would a cake tier, because he was heavy. And right now I'm just getting an idea of where I want to place this dowel. I want to place it right where his tail is. So I'm gonna look at that first before I flip him over and place my dowel where I need it to be. I reheated all my Isomalt that was in here, and I'm just going to roll my dowel a couple times in the liquid Isomalt. I roll it once, then let it set probably on my silicone mat, then pick it back up and roll it again, and then that gives me a couple coatings of Isomalt that will help it stick to my dragon. Place this where I want it. I can wiggle it around a little bit while it's still hot and then just let it sit and cool again completely. And this will help support my dragon and place him where I want to on my cake. Once that's cooled, I flip it over and I'm going to begin painting. I'm painting directly on my dragon. Now you can paint with the airbrush food coloring, but because I wanted gold, I'm painting with the edible gold from the Sugar Art store. And I just use a little bit of vodka to make it into a paste that I can paint with so that it's not just a dust. And the vodka evaporates, so don't worry about the alcohol in your lollipop if any of the kids are going to be eating this. It evaporates and they can still enjoy their lollipop. But if you don't want to use the edible gold paint, you can just use the airbrush food coloring and paint with that. And so I am painting, I have it more of a thicker consistency where I'm painting these lines. And then after I've done painting the lines, I'm going to thin it out with a little more vodka so it's a little more thin, and then give it some airbrush coloring on the wings and the face a little bit and anywhere else I want that. And then I'll use 1 or 2 drops of the airbrush food coloring for the eye. I'm just gonna use a blue right there, and I mix it with some white so it's opaque. Okay, now like I said, there's supports in my castle. I use the smoothie straws for supports and then cardboard. And so I support it just like I would a tier. And the reason this is going through is because I cut a hole in that cardboard so that my dowel can fit right through that hole. And so I'm pressing that through all the way until I feel myself reach that cardboard that supports my dragon. And there he is on top of the castle. And also this was a super easy castle I did for those who are looking for something fast and easy to decorate a castle. That tutorial is going to be on my YouTube channel as well to make and decorate an easy castle cake. So thank you so much for joining me today, and please check out my channel for other Isomalt tutorials.